Hello, everyone. Ba-ba. How's it going, Pietro? Benny, hello? Okay. Sherlock Bones is back on the case. So, let's see. Last stream, we went through a little bit of Liurnia, and we were also looking at some of the early DLC stuff. So I think... My plan was to go through Castle Ensis alongside Liurnia, but maybe I'll just leave that a little bit. Yeah, we'll stay in Liurnia for the moment. I think I'll go up the right-hand path. And one thing I'm thinking about as I do this, I think, will be how this would line up with the Shadowlands and maybe when that was removed. Ensis is pronounced like Sean Connery would say it. Ensis. And what's up, Colt? Okay, so we'll get a bit of a closer look at one of these divine towers. I still haven't done the Limgrave one, and still haven't done Stranded Graveyard or Agil, but I'm going to leave those until we start looking at some of the dragon stuff in the DLC and kind of do that side by side. Why is your weapon not the family flail? Oh, that's a good point. I probably should have that for proper bone build crafting here, but I haven't gotten there yet. Isn't it right at the start of Altus? Yeah, I just sort of... I kind of sped through a bit of Altus in order to, not Seethwater Cave, but the cave... What is it called? The secret one? Like in that little lake. I didn't really want to get to Altus yet. I just did a little bit of it so I could fight Magnus the Beast Claw so that I could get to the DLC. So I will... You know, I sort of skipped ahead a little bit, but mostly I'm going to go in order, so... do you think the Banished Knights could be from Shadowlands? I was thinking about it today because of the horn on their armor. Yeah, there is that, where Gaius's arena is, which seems to be a battlefield, there are Banished Knight, armor pieces on the ground. So, I'm not totally sure. I mean, clearly they have some connection to Dragon Communion. And I would say... Probably, you know, they were working for Placidusax. Hold on, let me just kill this guy before I think about that. Yeah, so I think they were probably working for Placidusax. There was something... I can't remember if it was 1.0 or... I want to say it's just the Japanese description, which calls Engval and Oleg the Wings of the Storm Lord. In the current version, they're just called the Wings of the Storm. I don't know if I have either of them. Oh yeah, here we go. Engval. Yeah, one of the two knights dubbed the Wings of the Storm. In the Japanese, I'm pretty sure it's in the Japanese, they're more specifically called the Wings of the Storm Lord, which, you know, I guess there's still questions about who the Storm Lord is, but most likely I would say that the sort of easy answer for that would be Placidusax, because, you know, he's in the storm, he turns himself into a storm cloud, and that would kind of track with the Banished Knights being, you know, using Dragon Communion, which now we know is something that Placidusax sort of co-opted people to go kill the drakes. So, some connection with Farum would make sense. And there are Banished Knights in Farum. So all of that, there are Banished Knights and Stormhawks in Farum. So the idea that they, I don't know, come from Farum or are allied with that somehow, I think is probably where I'm at right now. You think the Divine Towers were once connected in a way to the Divine Gateway. You know, it's a funny thing, so I was thinking about that. So if we put the Shadowlands map in the middle, one thing which becomes clear is that Ballarat is right around here. And there's several interesting things about that. One is that it's right near the Ancient Dynasty ruins, which are above ground. The other thing is, with Enieri Lim, it's one of the two places, including Farum, which are permanently in sunlight, right? No matter how long you rest, it's always, the sun is always shining. And you could say that that's maybe just a fact of it sort of being more divine. It's up high, it's closer to the divine realm, let's say. But if Farum was here, if like Enieri Lim sort of connected to Farum in some way, that would also kind of explain it would partially explain the ruins that we find, because we find mostly the Farum ruins scattered in Limgrave and Liurnia. I don't actually remember if there are any in Caelid. There may be some, but not many for sure. It tends to be Limgrave and the eastern coast of Liurnia. And so Farum being sort of closer to the western side at some point makes a lot more sense. Now, it being right above Enieri Lim feels a little bit strange. I would expect it to be like closer to Stormvale. That would make the most sense, but in any case, there seems to be a connection there. I mean, the oddest thing is that the Hornsent don't really have anything to do with dragons as far as, at least explicitly, so... nothing is from the Shadowlands. Everything there is from the Lands Between. They're just stuck there now. Yeah. Wasn't Farum before Enieri Lim? Banished Knights probably just had old stuff left over from before Hornsent. Yeah, it's all kind of debatable. Farum certainly seems very ancient. I mean, all we really know is that the dragons ruled before the Erd Tree. When before the Erd Tree, we don't know. Like, did they always, like, for all of that time before the Erd Tree, did they rule? Hard to say. Yeah, the timeline is a bit of... we're just missing a lot. What would Marika's favorite Pokemon be? That's a good question. What would Marika's favorite Pokemon be? Ditto. Yeah, ditto. I don't know, there's probably a few different good answers. I like the ditto one. Pseudo-Udo? Yeah, sure. Roselia. Get confused about the Dragon Lord and the Hawk sometimes? Yeah. You're not alone. Oh, what's up, Tazo? Welcome. Got the stream on while I work on the last final for the semester. Nice. Hello, Crunchy. Always imagine the Stormlord to be Serash or a Hornsent Divine Warrior, given their storm techniques. Yeah, I think there's a decent argument you can make for the Stormlord being Serash. I think probably the best argument there would be, why did Godfrey face the Stormlord alone? Because at least the way that description is written, it kind of implies, like, this is something he did after he became Godfrey, after he became Elden Lord. But at that point, he should have had Serash on his back, so why would he face anyone alone at that point? Serash sort of signifies his lordship, so... but that could also possibly work. Serash, I think, clearly has a connection to Farum, and, you know, the beasts men worship dragons. Serash also seems to have a connection to Malekith, so it could be that, like, Serash just simply wouldn't fight Placidusax if Godfrey went there, and that would also kind of make sense with, there's a Crucible Knight in Farum, so it seems like Godfrey maybe led some campaign to Farum. Were there other Elden Lords between Placidusax and Godfrey? I mean, that complicates things. I mean, Godfrey is said to be first Elden Lord, Radagon is second Elden Lord. Now, you could argue, oh, well, that's just talking about in the age of the Erd Tree. I think... because we have a very direct contradiction there, right? Placidusax was said to be Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. Now, one possibility is that... well, so one possibility is that it's just incorrect, that it's revisionist history, that Godfrey is not first Elden Lord, that he's just basically lying about that. I'm not a big fan of that idea. Another possibility is that because Farum is removed from time, it's as if Placidusax was never Elden Lord in a sense, because he's sort of removed from the timeline. And therefore Godfrey is like the new first Elden Lord. I also kind of... one idea I've been playing with is that Placidusax wasn't really Elden Lord in the way that Godfrey was Elden Lord. That rather than the Elden Ring, Placidusax was Elden Lord of the Elden Beast. And so it's sort of like it's not exactly the same thing, and that would kind of... it's a little bit of maybe a cheap way to escape the contradiction, but I kind of like that idea. If you don't mind me asking, why the sacrificial axe as Sherlock Bones' weapon of choice? Well, I'm just interested in this weapon. this one and the Serpent God's Curved Sword form a kind of pair where they do the opposite thing. They're both sacrificial weapons, and when you kill someone, they return some energy. In this case, it's FP. In the Serpent God's Curved Sword, it's HP. And I feel like this is a very important dichotomy, the Serpent and the Deathbirds, as like pre-Erdtree religions. And I don't really understand the Serpent stuff, so I'm trying to maybe get there by osmosis by understanding the Deathbird stuff. Real quick, are the Stormlord and Stormhawk King different? I mean, yeah, that is another possibility that the Stormhawk King was the Stormlord. I'm not sure about that. So the Stormhawk King... Actually, do I have the Stormhawk King? Let's see. Maybe I can read it. Oh, there it was. Ashes of a hawk revered by all others as sovereign back in the days when Stormvale's winds still raged like no other. This ancient monarch is proud, however, refusing to answer anyone's summons. So... And I think the Japanese is a bit clearer in that it's not saying that he was a hawk revered by, like, every person as sovereign. He was revered by all the other hawks as sovereign. He's the king of the Stormhawks. Could that be the Stormlord? Maybe. I mean, I've even thought maybe Ornis was the Stormlord, the first sort of divine warrior to divinely invoke the divine birds. I mean, really, we have one explicit reference to the Stormlord in that Godfrey faced him alone, and then maybe with the Japanese descriptions, we have the Engval and Oleg ashes. There isn't really a lot. So yes, it's possible. It's possible it's the Stormhawk King. It's possible the Stormhawk King was subservient to the Stormlord. I mean, there's lots of different ways you could read it. Oh, come on. Kinda implies one-on-one combat, winner takes all. Like Homer's logic in Iliad, where rulers fight instead of armies facing each other. I'm guessing that's in reference to the Godfrey facing the Stormlord alone. Yeah, that is a thought. I mean, what you do see is, like, Stormvale clearly had a previous ruler. Stormvale was not built by Godfrey. It's something that he took over. I think that's clear. Because you have an ancient crest of this hawk that I think definitely came before Godfrey. Godfrey doesn't seem to have anything in relation to the storm. He doesn't have storm powers. So that would be an argument, I think, against Sarosh being the Stormlord. But yeah, there's sort of a lot of different ways you could read it. Oh, why don't I have any freaking flasks? Goddamn dogs. It's not plausible that Marika doesn't know of Placidusax, but she's not exactly communicative, so maybe she forgot to tell Godfrey. Yeah. See that all the stuff with the dragons in Farum Azula is just so like you can spend hours just like figuring out a really nice theory for the timeline, and then the dragons come in and that just like screws everything up. But clearly they're super important. And there's just so many different ways, like especially once you start injecting some kind of time shenanigans in there, it could be so many different things. The serpent stays low to the ground, but the hawk flies above all. Yeah. I think one thing which could possibly be relevant is the fact that with the Horned Warriors, it starts with Ornis and the Divine Birds. So you start with these birds, and then you get the lions. And now it seems like birds aren't really, you know, the divine birds have nothing to do with the storm. Now the lions have something to do with the storm. And that's sort of odd. You wouldn't necessarily, like, you would more naturally connect birds to the storm, especially with the storm hawks, than you would the lions. So one possibility is that the storm as like a, you know, a power is something that could be passed on. So maybe initially the birds sort of, maybe it was more something to do with the birds, and then the lions sort of took it over. Unclear. Mesmer's abyssal serpent seems to be something quite different from the god-devouring great serpent that Rykard fed himself to. Seems to be. I'm not sure. That's unclear. I mean, the snake skin in Bonnie Village is a pretty exact match for the Iglay snake skin, so there's clearly a very close connection to them. Whether they are one and the same or different manifestations of the same, you know, deity or force, or whether they're, you know, twin snakes or something. I don't think they're unrelated. So let's just look at a couple items that we picked up, see if there's anything interesting. Nothing there. Skill of the Golden Order Fundamentalist Knights. I missed that, actually. Fundamentalist Knights. So not only are there the hunters and then these sort of, you know, monks like Goldmask, but you also have Fundamentalist Knights. The Cuckoo Feather. That is something we'll look at in Rea Lucaria. I think I picked this up last time, but I don't think I read it. The Red Feathered Branch Sword. A talisman adorned with red feathers, once used in ancient death rituals. The heart sings when one draws close to death, and a glorious end awaits those who cling so tenaciously to life. This seems to line up with this sort of Valhalla type implication of the Helfin Steeple, that those who meet their death in battle are able to see the lamplight of the Helfin. And that seems important. That's not doing very much damage. Abyssal Serpent lives in Mesmer. It's more bizarre that the dragons attacked Lendel when they did. Yeah, I think that's a really important part of the story that we really don't understand. Why did the ancient dragons attack Lendel? I think understanding that would put a lot of pieces together, because arguably Godfrey and America's order is, I mean, what would have been the impetus for that? Like, you know, the ancient dragons don't seem to have much much in the way of mundane motivations, right? They seem to be kind of above everything. The only thing that they really care about, as far as we know, is sort of fighting against the Drakes. So would that imply that the America's faction sort of allied themselves with the Drakes? Was Bale involved in any of this? Bro. Oh, hello. I think Farum was destroyed after the shattering of the Elden Ring because of the Golden Seed. We can get there. Yeah, that's a good point. There is a little minor, you know, illusory golden tree there. One idea I've been playing with is that maybe when Marika ascended to godhood, that, like, the plan as far as the Hornsent are concerned was that she'd be sort of like a divine consort to Placidusax, and that the seduction and betrayal was kind of finding this random Highland warrior to go maybe lead a campaign against the dragons and, like, claim the Elden Ring, which would then be like Marika's god. Marika was the god that fled Placidusax, and it would kind of make some things line up. I'm not, you know, you have to make some leaps to get there, but it kind of makes sense. Isn't there a shield that depicts Stormhawk King as the ancient ruler of Stormvale or something? Not exactly. So there is the Hawkcrest wooden shield, this one, which depicts a hawk with potentially a crown or maybe horns coming out of it. That's one possibility. And it says it's the long-forgotten crest of Stormvale, ancient in design. So, one nice idea there is that possibly Ornis ruled Stormvale. So then, you know, it's like a horned bird. Interesting thought about Marika and the Placidusax god. Yeah, I mean, one thing, because with Marika's story, like, this is... Marika is the main character of Elden Ring. Understanding her story is the key to everything. You know, we may never be able to fully put together every little piece, but, like, success in understanding the lore would be really understanding America's story. And there's just so many different pieces to it. I mean, now we have the shaman stuff and the horn scent, but there's also the Nox and the Newman and the Eternal Cities. And then there's clearly something to do with Farum Azula, because Malekith is her half-brother, and Malekith is a beast clergyman in Farum Azula. There's a depiction of the Elden Ring there, and there's also a statue of, you know, someone, potentially a young maiden, surrounded by 3 wolves. Sarosh also, I think, has armor that is reminiscent of Beastmen. He clearly has a connection to Malekith, because Malekith gives us the Beastclaw Great Hammer, which symbolizes Sarosh. America clearly had some connection to Farum. So what that connection was, difficult to say. But I think putting together the dragons and America, like figuring out how that fits together, I think is a really key part of all of this. Come out, one and all, from the darkness underground, and let us offer unto the maiden our eyes. That's interesting. I wonder if that implies literally coming from, like, the Eternal Cities. Because there is an interesting link. So, the Eternal Darkness spell tells us that it's the manifestation of the despair that was the cause of their ruin, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But it mentions despair in particular. And then you have in the Consecrated Snowfield, you have another Astel, and it's below this place that's afflicted by frenzy. I wonder if there's something like underground, the void of despair, which looks like eternal darkness, is one thing, and then above ground, it's looks like the frenzied flame. The Shadow of the Erdtree trailer is uninterpretable, given how there's basically no lore in the game about the nature of the Gate of Divinity, how America ascended to godhood, and who was seduced and betrayed. Well, we do get the Secret Rite Scroll, which tells us that a god's return will be ushered in by a lord, and the lord's soul will require a vessel. We still have to make some leaps to figure out how much of that, or maybe all of it, or maybe none of it, applied to America's ascension. But that's at least a little clue.
Hello? Is someone there? Would you donate any Shabiri grapes in your possession to me? I'm on a pilgrimage in search of the distant light, and when I eat one of those grapes, I can feel the light in the back of my eyes. You're not like the others who give me grapes, are you? They rest their trembling hands upon me. Howling wordlessly, they gently stroke my eyes, their frail fingers emaciated. Yet still, they give me the grapes, but you seem somehow firmer. You are most kind indeed. May the blessing of the fingers be upon you. You are most kind. May the blessing
So there's Irina's body, despite the fact that we see Hayata. Aceroy says they use Moog's body as the vessel for Radon, but the body is significantly less afflicted by the Crucible. Well, keep cooking there. I want to hear the next part. When Gurranq breaks the Death Rune seal, behind him is the image of the statue with the wolves. It's the only part of the cutscene where it appears. It made me wonder if it was an allusion to Marika. In what way? Maybe you can elaborate on that. If the Sacred Rites scroll is correct, who was the vessel, Horalu, and soul, Serash, used to make a lord? And was Marika already a god before Conquest of Giants? Yeah, that's... Well, yeah, as Galamoth points out, first of all, we don't know for sure if Marika used the same rite to ascend. I would say there's a decent argument that she did, because I think sort of part of the point of the DLC is to tell us about Marika by way of analogy with Miquella. Now, there could be meaningful differences between those stories, so we can't necessarily draw firm conclusions, but you know, that's why we get so much about Marika's backstory, I think, is this game is really about Marika in a way that none of the other games have been about a singular character. You know, Demon's Souls is not about Allant. Dark Souls is not about Gwyn in the same way. I mean, clearly they're like the most important figure, but it's not really like their story. Elden Ring is really about Marika, that she is the character who we're exploring, and basically everything in the game is a way of, you know, giving her story context. So my feeling is, you know, from the designer's perspective, the information that we get about Miquella's rise to godhood is a way of telling us about Marika's rise to godhood. Now, it's telling us that by analogy, which means that it's not necessarily the same, but yeah, I would lean towards the right being, you know, it's so specific that it would feel strange if Marika's rise to ascension was, if her ascension was different, because, like, what was the point of, I guess you could argue that, well, it was just telling us about Radon, but I don't know, I feel like there's something more there. Yeah, and as for if the Sacred Rites scroll is correct, that would be one interpretation. Horalu is the... I mean, we know that Serash was the Lord of the Beasts, so he was a lord, and then you could argue Horalu was the vessel with sort of Serash attached. However, it's not really a good analogy, because, you know, it's not like Serash is possessing Godfrey. And, he's sort of holding him back. And Horalu has the sort of autonomy to destroy Serash when he feels it's time. So it doesn't seem to be... Well, it's certainly not the exact same situation as with Moog and Radon. Maybe it's analogous enough, but it's a little bit unsatisfying there. The implication that Marika made the Divine Gate with all those fresh bodies from the trailer could indicate that she had means to ascend that were not available to Miquella. Yeah, and I do want to look at the Divine Gate. Because there are kind of two different layers there. I'm not sure if it means anything, but... they're kind of two different layers of bodies. The fact that there's nothing about the Divine Gate in game makes me sad. I don't know that the Divine Gate is really all that important to understanding the lore, however. I mean, at that point, I think, you know, we're dealing with, like, there is some magical gate. It clearly requires sacrifices. It allows you to become a god. The specifics of how it works, I don't think are super key there. That's just my feeling. The Nox civilization are the biggest mysteries in the game to me. Like in the lore, they're related to America, but how, I don't know. Yeah. I'm thinking more and more that the Nox are sort of descendants of the Hornsent. Or maybe a separate faction or something, but there's a lot of similarities between Enir Ilim and the Nox architecture. And then obviously the sort of bodies building up the architecture. Oh crap. Ow. There's definitely going to be more Elden Ring, just not as DLC. George R. R. Martin all but confirmed there's a movie in the works, and once Sony owns Katakawa, they're going to milk it. Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not really, like, I feel like a lot of people... I don't know, I watched Ratatosker's conversation with Ziostorm, and, I was, like, chuckling the whole time because of how frustrated they both were. It was very funny. And, like, Rata was, sort of frustrated but excited. Like, he still really wants to understand it. And Zio had just sort of gave up. He was a bit more pissed about it. I feel like a lot of people post-DLC felt this sense of, I don't know, despair, like, kind of futility in trying to understand the lore. I don't feel that way. I feel like we have all the information that we really need, at least to understand the big picture. It's just a matter of putting it together, and that'll take some time. If the Nox drew the ire of the Greater Will and we see the petrified masses underground, perhaps the Greater Will saw what the Nox were attempting because that's what it told America to do before. The final boss and ending to Shadow of the Erdtree did not spark joy. Fortunately, the rest of it is incredible. Well, I really liked the final boss. I liked it a lot. I think the material for Elden Ring might be extremely detailed, which might cause a lot of confusion with the usual Miyazaki style of storytelling. Yeah, I think this is something I said a few times before the release of the DLC. I didn't really make a big deal out of it, but I said, I think several times on stream and maybe even in my videos, like, I think people have... We have this sense that there's this big timeline, right? And because of... Well, I guess I'll put it this way, like, I don't think that there is... People were making the assumption that because we get, let's say, in a period of time, we get like 3 item descriptions that talk about it. And then in another period of time, we get like 50 item descriptions that talk about it. That I think people were sort of automatically making the assumption that that is proportional to the amount of time that passed and the number of important events. Whereas my suspicion was that, you know, the timescale is way bigger and there's just a lot of stuff that happened in between that we just didn't get anything about. And I think that's basically what the DLC kind of was, a wake-up call to a lot of people. That, you know, there's just massive parts of the history of this world which we basically had no information about, but were still important. And I think if you were assuming that they were unimportant or that there wasn't much going on or that it was actually a brief period of time, that that would have been surprising and maybe frustrating. Glum-eyed Queen, where art thou? Well... I mean, I'm still, I think... I have a few different theories about the Glum-eyed Queen, but I think where I lean still most strongly is that the Glum-eyed Queen was Marika. I think that's the one that makes the most sense. So, where am I going now? I guess I'll go the left-hand path. Oh, we'll go to Albinaric Village. All of that. Not Melina? Well, I see Melina as a sort of a reflection of Marika. So I think to the degree that she seems to sort of visually and thematically embody aspects that you'd associate with the Glum-eyed Queen, I think it's because she is like much more a carbon copy of Marika, and maybe even literally so. Not a clone exactly, but I mean, you know, there's the 4 butterfly kids, and I think the idea with a butterfly, I think it's possible that they were born in a method that was not normal. And they do seem to reflect Marika and Radigan in a more... there's a closer match there, right? Mikola... I don't think, like, Mikola and Melania, at least, were clearly born by some weird method, because it's literally one person giving birth to them. So, like, how does that work? Is it some kind of tree birth, some kind of splitting off of the soul, some weird magical shit? Right, it's not, like, sex and copulation. There's something else going on there. And then if you extend that out to the other butterfly kids, I think that recontextualizes Mesmer and Melina. I think there's meant to be the implication that they were born by some other mean, which is more, you know, parthenogenetic. It's more of a kind of splitting off or magical cloning type of thing. It's not just a normal birth.
Cheers for that.
Glowmite Queen has to be Marika. I don't think they would just throw out another random Empyrean and all but ignore her in game / lore. I mean, they might, but, yeah, I think I agree. No, I mean, I think there's a lot of contextual evidence that supports the Glowmite Queen being Marika. I mean, a lot of it which I already made in my video prior to the DLC, but I think especially with the DLC, now that there's a very clear connection to Marika and snakes, now that it's clear Marika used fire quite liberally, she was pro-fire at one point, that she, you know, went on a crusade, essentially. I mean, I guess caused Mesmer to go on a crusade, but same difference. You know, she was pro-fire, pro-snake, pro-killing the previous sort of divine establishment. I think a lot of that makes a lot more sense with her being the Glowmite Queen. They throw a lot of random god names into the lore and simply never explain them. True. Yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly willing to accept that there are throwaway stories, right? Things that are just not really gonna be explained, or not super important to the main arc of the story. Kind of little vignettes that occurred over the course of it. But I don't think the GEQ fits that.
Oh, it's you. Well, what do you make of it? What's happened to this village? I witnessed a sight much the same in my infancy. The oppression of the weak. Murder and pillage unchecked. A waking nightmare made by men. But this time, I'm a woman grown. And though the suffering cannot be undone, I can still mete out justice. Justice to the oppressors. Let the scars I carve remind them. I am Nefeli Lu, warrior. But this time, and though there's justice to let the scars
I sort of wonder if that's an important feature of, like, the qualities that make one a lord or a leader, to mete out justice. Because there is this theme of, like, the cycles of revenge. You know, Mikla's Age of Compassion is sort of naive because you can't just make everybody peaceful. There is original sin. People are going to fight each other. They're going to hold grudges. But if you dole out justice, then people can kind of abide by that. Justice is a way of, you know, authoritative justice is a way of avoiding just endless cycles of revenge. So that may be an important concept. There's a lot more, I think, to the Albinaurics than I fully understand. I think especially with Gaius being an Albinauric. Just look around a bit. So here you see their legs just kind of disappearing. Not like rotting away, but literally turning into like some spiritual essence. Here's a bunch of them by coffins. What are you doing, dude? Facing the Erd tree? Interesting, he's wearing the, like, the Erd tree symbols here. Huh. But he does seem to be... Is he an Albinauric? No, this is just like a normal guy. Well, is he? He's got the... No, he's just like a normal dude. He's got feet. I noticed the dragonkin are on their knees. Maybe their legs withering away like the Albinaurics. That's an interesting observation. Yeah. The Albinaurics are made of larval tears of some sort, and I remember its description says larval tears are between a spirit and form. I don't know if they're made of larval tears. I think they're made of silver. They're made by human hands. Core of a creature of mimicry known as a silver tear, as much a substance as it is a living organism. And then in the DLC we get a different type of larval tear. Well, it is just the same larval tear, but it says, yeah, something like it's neither spirit nor physical, but something in between. This is, I think, makes a lot more sense with some of the DLC context, that the Two Fingers are people. I feel like every time I say this, people are like really surprised by this, but I feel like it's, when you just look at the descriptions, it's pretty clear that the Two Fingers were just people who transformed. There's a lot of context which makes that point, I think. And here them having legs makes more sense. Hey Crunchy, do you take item descriptions as 100% reliable? Do you read the text as something written by the devs or as something written by an adjacent character in-game? I would say, largely I would say they're reliable, but they're often speaking from a certain perspective. So it's not, I don't think the item descriptions are like written by a character in game. They're non-diegetic, but they're often written to elucidate the perspective of a specific, faction or person or agenda. So I think the facts that they say, if they say X happened, I think X happened. That is 100% reliable. And if they say, X is an evil deity, then I think you can go, well, okay, is it really evil in like an absolute sense? Is that authoritative truth about this story? Or more likely, I think, that is the perception of the people in the lands between that are talking about this. They think of it as an evil deity. So whenever there are value judgments, I think you have to interpret that as reliable. You have to interpret it as, I think it is reliable, 100% reliable information, but it's talking about people's perceptions a lot of the time. It's not, so I would draw that distinction between facts and value judgments. The facts are true. The value judgments are from within a certain context of the people there. Weren't they birthed from Meteor? No, it doesn't say that the Two Fingers were birthed from Meteor. It just says that Meteor is the mother of the Two Fingers. And we already know that there's a lot of sort of adopted children and people acting like mothers and fathers and so on. So but we have there's a gesture called the Two Fingers where you pose as a person, with your hands up in the air. It's clearly meant to imply that this is something that people did. I think to, that is what the Two Fingers are, essentially, is this people doing that and then being transformed. There's all this stuff about the lampreys, and there is an explicit description that says, people tried to become Two Fingers by eating these, fingerprint nostrums and so on. So she literally gives birth to fingers in her boss fight. It's not a metaphor. Yeah, but she doesn't give birth to two fingers. I think the two fingers are... I think she is the literal mother of the finger creepers. But I think the two fingers are people who follow Metyr and are attempting to sort of replicate these tail fingers, the microcosm, an attempt to contact the greater will. It's at least very explicit that people tried to become two fingers, which then, I think with all the context of that, suggests that that's what the two fingers are, is people who tried to become two fingers. I mean, it's either the two fingers are people, or you have to say that the two fingers were birthed by Metyr, but then people tried to become two fingers and they failed, which is odd. That just seems like a really weird thing to include. I think it makes a lot more sense to say that the two fingers are... And when you look at the finger ruins, there's nothing about two fingers there. The two fingers, I think, are very clearly a reference to Metyr's tail, which is where the microcosm is cradled. This is an attempt to contact the greater will, and that is what the two fingers do, right? The sort of antenna to contact the greater will. So... And then you have the three fingers, which, there's no reference that Metyr was the mother of the three fingers. But also with all this stuff about mothers, like the whole thing with Metyr's quest is like Ymir wants to become a mother. He gives birth to finger creepers. I think there's a strong possibility that Metyr was also a kind of person, or at least that the form that she takes now is not her original form. We know that she was a shooting star that fell upon the lands between, but I don't think that necessarily means she was like a weird finger monster at that point. This is kind of interesting because Albus is basically using the mimic veil there.
I haven't a clue. No secrets lie with me, not a one. Oh, please leave me be. Wait then, you're not one of them? Well, what a relief. Oh, goodness me. I am Albus and Albinoric. As you can see, we're finished. The whole village is finished. The cursemongers have destroyed everything. No one that remains has their wits about them.
Cursemongers.
I beg you. Would you look after this medallion? You must keep it out of the cursemongers' hands. And if you should meet the young Albinoric Latena, then please give it to her. A chosen land awaits us, Albinorics. The medallion is the key that leads to the city. It's only a quaint treasure for we who cannot make the journey. But for dear Latena, it is needed to fulfill her purpose.
Well, that's a mistake. It spelled fulfill with only one L at the end.
My legs will soon fade, and with them my life. Alas, this is the immovable fate of all Albinorics.
I haven't a clue. He's got a Welsh accent, which is also like Ronnie and I think Celivis and Pydia. Don't remember if E.G.'s accent is Welsh. I don't remember Blythe's either. I guess we'll look at that again. But I think there are some things about the accents that are deliberately meant to kind of tie people together. But there's something about the Albinorics that I don't understand. There's something really important there. And that ties into all of the Nox and Eternal City stuff, I think. Does Renala have a Welsh accent? That's a good question. I don't remember. Ow. Oh no, I lost the little thingy. Pretty sure Blythe is Irish. Interesting. Isn't there another dog back here? Yeah. Blythe's accent is surely not Irish. I don't recall. Come on. Bro. I should have really looked at the Omen Killer. I guess there'll be another one. I'll have to look at his mask and stuff. And what did we get? We got Crucible Knot Talisman. A talisman fashioned from a bony knot that embodies the aspects of various creatures, said to have grown on the human body long ago. A vestige of the crucible of primordial life, born partially of devolution. It was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. Born partially of devolution. That would sort of imply like the horn scent. And this kind of fits in with what we know about them, I think. That it is kind of like a kind of pagan religion where getting in touch with the animalistic side, with the primal aspect, that's the sort of divine part, that's the holy part. The Omen Killer Sword is like a twisted version of the Horned Warrior's ability to channel horns onto their blades. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. That is a very good point. Hello of no renown. Ivory sickle. These weapons are evidence of their dedication to the Halleck tree despite never having entered its presence. Yeah, isn't it odd? There are no albinarchs in the Halleck tree, are there? Is it just that they didn't get there yet? Or that they can't get there, maybe. I guess it depends on whether Loretta is an albinarch, which I would lean towards she is. Aren't there albinarchs and cocoons in the Halleck tree? I don't recall. I mean, I remember the cocoons. I don't remember only visible with free cam. Okay, yeah, if they are albinarch bodies, that would, I don't know. I don't even know. I don't get the albinarchs. I don't get what's going on there. Don't get what's going on there. They show the same model as Albus. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Is there something to do with the Pale Tower content? Pale Tower. I'm not recalling that. I remember, I think in 1.0, Elphael had a different name. I think maybe this weapon referenced, but I mean, I would just say ivory. It's sort of symbolic of, like, Mikla's thing is all about unalloyed gold, which seems to be a kind of white gold. And, you know, that would make sense. The tree is a whiter kind of tree, therefore it has ivory rather than sort of, I don't know, I guess you say, yeah, is it made of bone? Where would that come from? A tusk? A horn? I don't know. I don't know. Do you assume the generations of albinarchs are iterative, as in the Nox are moving towards creating a type of albinarch that is indistinguishable from a real person? Well, there does seem to be a purpose in creating them, right? Because it's not an accident. They're made by human hands, and the second generation is like an attempt to correct the flaws in the first, right? Because the first generation has no... They don't have the ability to move around of their own accord. They seem to lose their legs. The second generation is an attempt to correct that, and they're, you know, very acrobatic. But of course, then it misses something else in the process. So there does seem to be a goal there. I don't know if the goal is to be indistinguishable from a person or something else. Could be sort of variations of the Nox experiments to create a lord, you know, the mimic tier and so on. Also, I think the albinarch wolf archers are actually a whole different generation of the Albus generation. I really like Smotown's idea that they are actually the same, and that this is part of the life cycle of the albinarchs, that the first generation begin female, and turn male as they age. There isn't like a whole lot of evidence to support that, but it just makes certain sense. I don't know. I kind of like that idea. I think in 1.0, the Albinorics were created by Raya Lucaria, which is also interesting. The first generation, at least. Why the fading legs, though? It's so bizarre. I mean, it could be just a way of representing, like, that they're imperfect beings. They don't, you know, they lack something. Why legs specifically? Difficult to say. I mean, could signify, like, autonomy, a lack of autonomy. They rely on the wolves to move around. Similar to Renala's Sweetings. Prior to the DLC, no Carrion could use their legs. Right, because Radon and Rykard and Ronnie are also... They don't walk around, and Renala also sort of floats. Radon's missing legs is eerily similar to the Albinorics. Yeah, there's something very strange with the Albinorics that I don't... Like, for example, Latenna... Maybe I should go find Latenna. Latenna calls Lobo her... Is it her other half? Her other half. Not her other self, but her other half. I think that's what she says. And, but that is eerily similar to the, you know, Radigan and St. Trina thing. And then you have wolves, and wolves have all these different connections. Wolves are symbolic of the oath, the Carrion Royal Covenant. Wolves are also shadows of the Empyrean. You have in Ordina, you have Albinorics and wolves, and then you have Black Knife Assassins. And so there's some connection there, I think. I think the Black Knife Assassins have silver armor as well, like the Albinorics. It's not blue silver mail, but I think it says silver scale armor, if I'm remembering correctly. Connection to the Eternal Cities, and this all ties in with America's connection to the Eternal Cities, which we don't understand. You have Gaius, who's an Albinoric. There's something going on with the Albinorics that's, I think, very important. And I don't know what it is. Black Knives also have that weird blue petal thing on their shoulder under their armor for some reason. I thought it was a feather, but you may be right that it's a petal. Oh, crap. Oh, crap. No! Renala does look vaguely albinoric, but she also bleeds red, I think. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a similarity between her and the Towering Sister. Which is like, okay, what does that mean exactly? Oops. Oh. The Arumi is found in Carrier Manor, which is the only reference to night folk in the entire game. Right, besides the character starting class thing. Yeah. The night people used to bleed silver, but then we choose that character, we bleed red. Maybe it's red silver. Yeah, the night folk are confusing. And I think there is a reference, the Nox, maybe it's the Spirit Ashes, say, it calls them a cold-blooded race. And that seems to be associated with silver. I remember one idea was that the Nox, like, essentially drained the night folk of their blood in order to create the silver tiers and the mimic tiers and maybe the albinorics as well. The Black Moon. The Black. Hmm. Let's go continue a bit of Hayata's quest. The first Carians were all women, the three sisters, just like the albinoric archers. Hmm. Hmm. not really playing very well. I'm thinking about... Just thinking about the Nox and their relationship to the ancient dynasty, to America, to maybe the Horn Scent. Like, the Nox are really... I don't even really understand where they fit in the timeline. The Forbidden Lands Knights Cavalry drops an Ash of War that summons clones, just like Promised Consort Radon does in Phase 2. Yeah... I don't really know if that's meant to be the same type of thing. More than likely, Nox were the other half of the Farum Empire, right? I don't know. That's possible. I mean, it's just so weird, like, where do they fit in? You know, in 1.0, the Nox were called, like, Descendants of America. Carrion/Nox architecture all over Malekith boss room? Really? I've never put that together. Interesting. I'll definitely have to look at that. Farum is the Sun Realm and Nox is the Moon/Night Realm. I mean, I am very partial to Cosmos's idea that basically the ancient dynasty got knocked underground and then the Nox built... Like, the ancient dynasty basically was the Nox. They got knocked underground and then they built the Nox architecture down there, because the Nox architecture is completely fine. There's no signs of damage or anything, whereas the ancient dynasty is all in ruins and there's bits of it up on top. Then exactly where do the ancestral followers fit in? You know, they seem to be related to the Horn Scent, thematically at least. Skill of the warriors who served Lunar Princess Rani. And I think probably the most likely interpretation there is that the Black Knight... Wait, what is he called? Knight's Cavalry, that he just killed, or he like scavenged that basically off of the battlefield. Hmm. Yeah, it's a pretty cool skill. And now I'm heavy.
Hello? Is someone there? Would you donate any Shabiri grapes in your possession to me? I'm on a pilgrimage in search of the distant light, and when I eat one of those grapes, I can feel the light in the back of my eyes. Oh, many thanks to you. Now I can feel the distant light once more. That aside, I wonder what Shabriri grapes really are. Delectably tender and sweet, yet searing. What a sight they must be to behold. No. That's not possible. Not all of those people. Their own... So those noises I heard were... Sorry. I'm all right now. Don't mind me. I apologize. You only did as I asked. I'll be fine. Think no more of it. I apologize. I'll be fine. Ah. Is that you over there? I've gleaned something very important indeed, thanks to you. The reason why it was eyes I had to eat. The distant light is far and frail, so faint it can't be seen by the naked eye. But with everyone's eyes together, it appears. Finally, it all makes sense. I'm certain now.
It all makes sense, bro. What are you talking about?
I will be a finger maiden. I've gleaned something certain now.
What we know now about the Ool leaving in coffin/arcs, I believe the Nox just moved into the Ool's ruins long after they left. Obviously the Claymen being prototypes for putrescent/silver. I don't think we know anything about the Ool leaving in coffin/arcs. I mean, we have that sort of stela in the Ancient Dynasty, which depicts some ships. I would say they're arriving somewhere. So, actually, well, the story that I sort of have leaned towards mostly with that depiction is that the stone ship sort of arrived and then the Ancient Dynasty came out of that. But the more I think about that, that doesn't really make much sense because there aren't any stone ships near the Ancient Dynasty. What could make sense is if that is a depiction of them leaving to go to the spirit world. This type of architecture, you see these same sort of things in Bellerat, by the way, in your Ilim. So I think there's architecturally, I'll do a more, you know, once we get there. Actually, what am I doing? I can just go there right now. Let's check out a little bit of Bellerat. I'm not sure if it's Bellerat per se or Anir Ilim, so I may not be able to see it until much later, but yeah, maybe just Anir Ilim. Bellerat seems a bit older. But there are a lot of different things, like for example, this being very similar to the design on the Eternal City chairs, where the giant maidens are. And potentially, I want to say there's something with the Tibia Mariners as well. Let's take our time here and take a look at some things first. So, okay, number one, we've got lots of different depictions of people. We've got a lion. Unclear what's going on there. And these are the statuettes that we find at the ruins everywhere, the scorched ruins and so on. So these are all part of the same culture. Oh, excuse me. Very difficult to make out anything that's going on here. Yeah, difficult to make sense of this. We clearly have some horned people at the top. The most I could probably say is it looks vaguely like a, you know, there's a lot of people sort of gathered, I would say some kind of pagan, maybe bacchanalian type of ritual. Really difficult to make sense of it. There just isn't a lot of detail. Not too dissimilar from Stormvale architecture. Clearly different, but could be somewhat related. And then inside. Cloths? Why the cloths? Presumably a lamp or incense burner of some sort. Lots of candles, incense type things. You know, smoke and fire. I think that's key. And then spider scorpion. Eight legs plus the pincers. A twisted double tree. Horn scent guy. Hmm. Hmm. So, what is going on here? It's definitely reminiscent of like those Buddhist monks who just basically starve themselves. Barely alive. Maybe closer to death? Is that the idea? Through asceticism, it's like you become closer to death. Closer to the spirit world. And then here we have these little monumentals holding a flame. Yeah, the chest, is that deliberate? Is that meant to be... It was cut open? Huh. Like the trolls? There's this weird, like, sunlight coming through. Lion? The horned lion? Hmm. Why does this statue have a head and maybe none of the rest do? Um, that's a good question. That is a good question. So spirit ash of those who came before, infused with potent spirituality, acquired from the corpses of horn scent and other objects that ritually decorate townships and villages across the realm of shadow. The withered corpses were called tutelary deities, and revered spirit ash was said to quietly accumulate in the palms of their hands. Quietly accumulate in the palms of their hands. Why ash? Why ash? They weren't burning anything, but such a disappointing reward if you don't use spirit summons. Well, you should just use spirit summons then. It's no fun that way? Well, I mean, if you're disappointed by playing without spirit summons, then I don't know. Play with them. Maybe it's more fun. Bellerat Tower Settlement. So, I wonder... Hold on. Let me look around here first. I can't really see. But the actual tower... Was Bellerat built around the tower? Was the tower actually first? Was that... I'd have to get a better view of it. Like, I just assumed that Bellerat was like... They built Bellerat and then they started building the tower, but I wonder if it's the tower settlement, then maybe like the tower began to be built and then Bellerat kind of was built around that. This is vaguely Farum looking with the domes. I guess a bit of Lendel too. Really liked this music. This is maybe the best ambient music. This and Gravesite Plain, very good. It's also just so cool. Bellerat has a very different vibe from anything that FromSoft has done before, I think. A sort of Middle Eastern, vaguely Middle Eastern kind of sense to it. I think the main spiral pillar of the tower is the most important part for some reason. I'm not sure if it's loaded in now. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can really see... Yeah, it's just like very low res and stuff. I'll have to check all this out once I unshadowfy it. tower goes deep, deep in the earth. You can see it in the Bellerot jail underneath. Really? That's interesting. I wonder... Because the thing is, oh, let me open the map. Come on, let me open the map. Let me open the map. Okay. So here, if you overlay the maps, this fits pretty perfectly right around here. This area. And if that were true, then you have these ancient dynasty ruins here. You have Ansel River and Noxtella. I wonder if maybe the Nox built a tower, or maybe the ancient dynasty built the tower from the ground up. If you stripped everything else away, you'd still have that main tower and the platform with the divine gate on top of it. How interesting. Yeah, it's a very confusing design. That's interesting. I will definitely have to look at that in the Bellerot jail. Disgusting water. It's important, I think. Now this Limnus Gate design is something that you also see on the hems of Nanaya. That's interesting. Yeah, I think there is something very important about all the water being sort of messed up here in Bellerot. We don't have nice flowing water, we have disgusting putrid water. It's all about Kagare. Ugh. Yeah, and see, this is all sort of reminiscent of Nox architecture. Once you complete the Woodfall Temple, the water clears up. Yeah, right. Welcome, Cecilia. Hello again. So what is the point of all of these? Actually, with the connection to the Nox, the sort of blankets make a bit more sense, like hiding themselves from the sun. And I wonder if that could relate to the Fell God as well. What was that? Oh. Because why else would you drape... I don't know, it's such an odd thing. Why would you drape the buildings like this? We've got little rings. Kind of looks like the Frenzied Flame, weirdly. A ring of fire surrounded by... Or maybe it's an eye? Could be an eye. Sort of a diamond shape, though. It's not really a good eye shape. It's such an odd thing. I mean, it seems very important that they drape. It's just sort of haphazardly as well. It's not, It's not like they've been very meticulous about how they do it, but it is all over the place. Maybe it's more symbolic? And it's all of the, It's so weird looking. It's all of the ruins, right? They all have that. Scorched Ruins has that. Odd. I think they're different coverings than the ones in the town ruins. But literally nothing else is loaded in. That's funny. Except for these guys. That's wild. They just totally delete the rest of the map. These guys are still fully loaded in. Full detail. That's wild. If I remember well, an interesting detail is that the statues are covered in Lower Bellerat, and in Enir Lim, they're left uncovered. The statues... So... Oh, the duo statue. Interesting. So, we're in some kind of pantry. Ooh, that looks very yummy, actually. Maybe I'm just hungry. Fruits and herbs and vegetables. Here, see, this is so odd. Lots of potatoes. It's very gold hair. Maybe vegetarians, in contrast to places in the regular world, all the storerooms have meat. But they do have the scorpion stew, right? Scorpion livers. Braids. Yeah, not eating mammals. Could be. Could be they worship beasts. Such an interesting design. It has like very definitely Japanese overtones, but also like, I don't know, Turkish or something. Such an interesting aesthetic here. No armbands, but rings. Pinky rings. Similar to the braids. Hmm. Oh, hello, Centered Tarnished. I feel like I'm a little bit too weak to continue right now. But now that I've spent some time looking at this architecture, I want to go back and compare to... Oh, we haven't gone down. Okay, maybe let's go down to Nokron. Why are buildings and statues draped like that? Yeah, it's a good question. Need to eat? Yeah, I do need to eat. I'll just make my way into Nokron and then probably end it there. Just since we're talking about the Nox, I think it doesn't make too much sense. Okay, if the Nox and the Hornsent are related, it doesn't make too much sense for the Nox to come after the Hornsent, because America went on a crusade burning them, blah blah blah. It would make more sense for them to be before. So, if the Hornsent are derived from the Nox, then you have something with the Ancient Dynasty. So maybe something like this. You have Rao, Ancient Dynasty, Nox, and then they build a tower from basically the underworld all the way up to the heavens. And that sort of becomes the Hornsent culture. And that would track with maybe the ancestral followers. Some offshoot. I don't know if it's like a direct evolution or just some offshoot. But I guess here this shows signs of damage as far as the Eternal Cities go. But God damn it. Why are burned ruins in the Shadowlands covered? If it was Mesmer's forces, why not destroy them completely? Why would they care to leave them uncovered? If it's the Hornsent, why are they mourning? Oh, mourning is an interesting... Yeah, I mean, the way it's so sort of haphazardly placed on things makes me think it's not serving like a functional purpose, maybe? I could go either way on that at the moment. It could be that there's something like protecting themselves from the light of the sun. But it could be more symbolic. It could be something... could be just to represent... Yeah, maybe mourning kind of makes sense. The Nox and Hornsent could also have branched out of the ancient civilization in parallel. Yeah, and that would kind of track with the ancestral followers, since they seem to be an offshoot of... They're clearly associated with the ancient dynasty, but they're still around despite everything else being around as well, so... The Newman fit in there somewhere too. Could be some sort of sect or offshoot of the Nox, or vice versa. Yeah. Yeah, but definitely I think this architecture is very similar. These little, these spires, there's some bigger ones as well. They have these little kind of like nubs on them. Any limb has that all over the place. So, I think the connection between the two is definitely valid. I didn't read all these. Okay, let's see. Fire was a symbol of the crusade, and even Mesmer's rank and file soldiers would wield it. There's his sigil. It is tinged with gold, mined near the foot of the Erd tree. These stones are said to have been used to bolster the strength of the royal forces. Okay. Even now, runes are still imbued with the power of life itself, implying they were not always. A mushroom that grows in the false night in and around the eternal city. It drips with a viscous fluid that behaves much like oil, which I think is basically putrescence. There are dev notes for the putrescent knight, which calls like parts of his body oil. And it looks similar. Tool of the fallen hawks who prowl the underground rivers. When the band's last embers were used up in their long search, they began to burn the bones of their fellows, but sealing their fate as dwellers of the underground for all eternity. I still don't understand that. Why would they seal their fate as dwellers of the underground? Is it because they burned the bones of their fellows? So they burned death, and this allowed them to acquire the cold ghost flame. They burned bones. But that sealed their fate. Sealed them to the underground. Kept them in the underground. Why? Because they would die outside of the Erd Tree's grace? Outside of sunlight? What is that? What is that? What am I looking at? Looks like a little hedgehog or something. Is that a lion? A skull? What is this? Oh, whoops. Ghost Flame creates vengeful spirits, right? Or rancor spirits. Are the fallen hawks trapped? Oh, are there spirits trapped underground? Interesting. Yeah, so maybe the ghost flame, it like keeps your spirit tied to where you are? Or is it just... Is it the ghost flame just because it's underground? Like, if you just use fire underground, it is always ghost flame? Hmm. Let's take a look at them. What's with the head? Do you think the Fallen Hawks are the people who E.G. said about looking for the Eternal City? It would make sense if they were Carrions, just in that they're looking for if they were looking for the Fingerslayer blade, that was Ronnie's purpose. And also that there's like trolls with them, at least one troll. You would assume it would have to be either Caria or Lindell. The fact that they're hawks, though, that makes me think of like Stormvale, all of that, so... Regular old longsword. Hands and feet covered in blood. I don't really get the thing with their head, like those holes. Maybe they were wearing some kind of helmet. Let's also read the Silver Tear Husk. A hardened husk shed by a formless life form known as the Silver Tear, found in and around the Eternal City. The Silver Tear makes mockery of life, reborn again and again into imitation. Perhaps one day it will be reborn a lord. Isn't there like a Crucible Knight watching over them in the Aqueduct? There's 2 Crucible Knights, actually. Yeah. But you just fall off? Wow. Yeah, so things like this, see, this doesn't make much sense unless they built this underground, right? Because, like, there's just a cliff right here. It's perfectly molded to fit this. So, I feel like they must have built these underground. And then you get this stuff. So, you know, there was a practice in Japan a long time ago where, like, slaves and criminals would be killed and buried under, as part of, like, the structure of bridges and things like this. I sort of wonder if, like, Bellerat and all of this is kind of a reference to that. It's like they're emerging out of the structure itself. Maybe the structure was built out of these people. See it more clearly over here. They're all over the place. But I think definitely there is meant to be... We have domed roofs in the same style as Bellerat. So yeah, I think there definitely is meant to be a connection between Bellerat and Irelim and the Nox. It makes more sense for the Nox to be first, which means... Which means what? They were trying to create a Lord of Night. Okay. I think I'm going to end it there for now. I go eat something. I think we'll continue with more Liurnia next time. Yeah. It is the grave of civilizations that flourished before the Erd Tree. And the Horn Center are definitely one of them. Yeah. Okay. Yep, next time we'll do a little bit more Liurnia, maybe a bit more Nokron, and perhaps Bellerat. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. I appreciate it. And I will see you next time. There we go. Take care.